Hi, in this video I will give an overview of views, stored procedures and triggers in SQL Server. So I will show how you can create views, stored procedures and triggers and then use them in SQL Server. So here you see the contents of this tutorial. First, a short introduction to the database that we are going to use, then how we can create and use views, then how to create and use stored procedures, and finally how to create and use triggers. First, a short introduction. So here you see the database that we are going to use in this tutorial. It's a simplified database. It consists of 3 tables. One table for course, one for student, and one for the grades. So it's basically a simple student university grading system, where you have a table that contains the different courses and a table that contains an overview of the students, and then a separate table where the grades for the different courses and students are stored. This so-called entity relationship diagram is created with a software called DB Designer. It's web-based, so basically you just go to the home page of DB Designer, create an account, and then you can create such an entity relationship diagram. And from that tool you can also click on export in order to export the SQL script for these tables, which you can see here. So here is the SQL script for this diagram, these 3 tables: course, student and grade. And then here you see the SQL code, one for creating the table course, one for creating the table student, and finally one for creating the table called grade. So the next step now is to go to the SQL Server Management Studio to open this script that is generated in this case from this DB Designer tool. Of course, you don't need to use this tool. You can use any kind of tool to create the entity relationship diagram, or just basically also manually create this table script like this. And then next is to just open that table script in SQL Server Management Studio and just click execute in order to insert these tables. So then I have opened my SQL Server Management Studio, which is part of the SQL Server installation. And then just click connect. And then here in the Object Explorer you have an overview of your different databases. I have many existing databases here, but here I will create a new database. So I'll just right click, create new database, and then we enter a proper name for our database. In this case it would be grades or something, and then just click OK, and then the grades database has been created here. So far there is no tables, no views, etc. So let's start inserting the tables from this SQL script that we had. So then I just click here, new query, and then we can start entering here manually, but I have already made this script using this DB Designer tool and exported as an SQL script. So then I just go to my hard drive where I have store this file. So then I have called it just grades tables. So I just open it in the SQL Server Management Studio, and then you see this table script for course, student and grade, and then I just click execute. And make sure that this grades is selected, because if you select something else here, the tables will be put into another database. But I want to have the tables in the grades database, so I make sure this is selected, and then I can just click execute. And then commands completed successfully. Then I can right click here on tables, click refresh, and then you see the course table, the student table, and the grade table has been created. Next we want to insert some data into the course table and in the student table. So let's just click here, new query, and then you can just, different ways to do it. We can basically also go here on the grades table, on the course table and the student table, etc. And then we can right click here and then click edit top 200 row in order to add data. But you can also do it manually by using insert statement like this, insert into, and we start with the course table. Here you find it in IntelliSense, so insert into course. And then, as you remember, in the course table we have the following column: the course name and the course ID. The course ID is a so-called primary key, and it's an identity column, meaning it's created automatically, so we only need to create data in the course name column. So then you just specify here course name like this, and then, sorry, not ID, course name, and then values, and then we can specify a name for the course. You can have a course called mathematics or something like this, and then you can just click execute. Course values like this. Now we can click execute, and now if we do like this, select all from the course table, I just mark this one and click execute, and then you see we have one course created. We can create another one. Instead of mathematics, we can create also a science course like this. We click execute, and then now we should have two different courses, one mathematics and one science. We can create another one. We can have a course also called programming like this, and click execute, and then we see now we have three different courses: mathematics, programming and science. So now we have three different courses. Let's also create some students. So you see in the student table we have the same here. We have student ID, which is a primary key, and an identity 11, meaning it's created automatically, and then we have a student name, and then we have an average grade. I will wait with this one, so I just start by creating some student in the student name, because the average grade is set to null, so you don't need to fill out this information, but we will do that later when we are creating a trigger. But let's start with the student name. So basically I can just change this information, go to type into student instead of course, and then student name like this, and then we have a name of the student. It could be some stupid students like Elvis Presley or something, and then select all from student, and then we click execute, and then you see now we have one student called Elvis Presley. Let's create some more students. We can have a student called John Wayne. So now we have two students. Let's create another one, something like this, and click execute. So now we have three different students and three different courses. So now let's check the contents of all our tables. So then I just type select all from course table and all from the student table like this, and finally all from the grade table. And I just click execute, and then you see we have three courses, three students, and then so far the grade table is empty, and also this average grade column is also empty. So let's also insert some grades into the system. So in order to insert some grade, let's check the grade table and the column. So we have the grade ID, which is a primary key and an identity 11. It's created automatically, and then we have foreign keys for the course ID and the student ID, and then we have the grade itself. So let's just insert some grades as well. Then we just use an insert statement. So insert into grade, and then we need to specify the columns. So then we have the course ID, student ID, and the grade itself, and then values, and then we need to specify a course ID and the student ID. So let's create some grades for the student called Elvis Presley, which has a student ID equals to 1. And then we start with the first course called mathematics, which has a course ID 1. So then we need to, for the course ID, we need to specify 1. And for the student ID, we also need to specify 1. And then let's see, you can get a grade 2.5 or something. And then I click execute, and then you see in the grade table, which you have here in the bottom, a grade 2.5 has been created for course ID 1, which is the mathematics, and for student ID 1, which is Elvis Presley. Let's also create some other grades for that student in the programming course. So then we change the course ID to 2, while the student ID is the same for Elvis Presley, and then he gets 3.5 in the programming course. So then I just click execute, and then you see now we have two different grades for student ID 1, which is Elvis Presley, for course number 1, which is mathematics, and course number 2, which is programming. And then let's finally also do it for the third course called science. Here he can get 1.5 or something. So now we have created 3 different grades for that same student. You can also create grades for the other students as well, but let's just start with that information we have here now. So now we are ready to start creating and using a view for this information. So in this part of this tutorial, we are going to create and use views. We have already created a database with 3 different tables, one for the course, one for the students, and one for the grade itself. So now we are going to create a view that we can use in order to get the information from the database that we want. So now here is the problem description. The last thing we did was to create these 3 different queries, select all from course, all from student and grade, and then we get this information from these 3 tables. This is the course table, this is the student table, and this is the grade table. But typically we want to have information like this, where you get an overview of the student name, the course name, and the grade for each student in each course like this. But this information is stored in 3 different tables, so the student name is stored in the student table, while the course name is stored in the course table, and the grade itself is stored in the grade table. So typically we want to merge information that are stored in this case in 3 different tables, but it could in general be 2 or more tables. So in order to make this happen, we typically need to create a view, because a view is a way to show information that are stored in multiple tables. So basically, what is a view? A view is what you can call a virtual table that can contain data from multiple tables. So basically, a view is a SQL query that links 2 or more tables together, making it possible to get data from these tables into a single query. So here you see an example of how we can create a view. Basically, if you create a view using SQL commands, you just need to use this command, create view, and the name of the view, and then as, and then here under select you need to specify the columns that you want to include in the view, and then here you need to specify the different tables, so from student, and then you need to use inner join to join the different tables together, because you have the student table, the grade table, and the course table, and then you can, since these tables are joined together with the primary keys and foreign keys, we can use this inner join in order to join these 3 tables together like this. So we can basically write this code and then just in the SQL Server Management Studio and click execute in order to insert and store that view on the database. But in SQL Server Management Studio there is also a view designer that you can use. So let's go back to SQL Server Management Studio and see how we can create this view. So we are back in SQL Server Management Studio, and then we have our grades database here, and then we have the different tables. We have course, grade, and student table. But here under views, it's so far empty. So then basically we can just right click on views and then select new view, and then here we get in the first here we can specify which table we want to use. So then we can start by including the student table, click add, and then typically also want to have the course table and the grade table in this case, and then we can just click close, and then you see we get these tables here and the relationship between them, and then we can just specify which column we want to include. So typically here in the student we want to have the student name, Here in the course, we want to have the course ID. And here in the grade, we want to have the grade itself. And then basically, the code that we need to create the view is automatically created for us, which you see here. So basically, the next step would be to just copy that one. And then I can just close that one and create a new query and paste that code in and use that code as a starting point for creating our view. Then basically we just need to just improve the code structure to like this, and just to remove all unnecessary parts. So then this typically dbd dot is not needed, so then select student name, and then course name, and then finally grade. And also here you need to specify the name of the table and the name of the column, because now we are getting information from 3 different tables. So then from the student table, and then we need to use this inner join. We remove this dbo dot, so we just have the grade table on, and here we specify the linking with the primary key, foreign key, like this, and then the same here for the course table, and like this. So now basically we are finished. So that's just the query. Then in addition we just need to use this command, create view, and the name of the view, I can call it student data or something, and then as, and then we have the select here. Can stick to lowercase like this. So basically that's it. So create view and the name of the view and as, and then here you specify the select statement, and here you join the different tables together using this inner join. You can also add an go at the end here. Now basically we can just click on execute in order to insert that view into the database. So far it's just that script here, and it's not part of the database. So then basically just click execute in order to create the view itself. And then commands completed successfully. Then we can go to views here, click refresh, and then you see this view has been created, and the name is student data. So now basically we can click here, new query, and then just basically select all from and the name of the view, which is student data in this case. Click execute, and then you see we get this information that we want. Here we have the student name, the different courses, and the grade in each of the courses like this. So that's how we create and use a view in the SQL Server Management Studio. Typically also here we have the what we can call the source code for the view. Typically we want to save it as a file, because typically we want to create this view in another database, either on my same computer or another computer. So typically it's a good practice to just save it as an SQL file. So then basically I can just go to the same location where I have already stored the grade tables. Here I can create the view itself, so I can call it the file, can call it just student data view to indicate that this is a view, and then .sql like this. So basically now I can close it, and then you see here on my hard drive it's stored here, student data.view. And if I want to change this view, assume I want to include the student ID or the course ID, etc. here in the same view, then I can just basically just drag it here in order to open it, and then I can change it. So instead of student, in addition to the student name, I also want to have the student ID, for instance, like this. And now I can click on execute here. But you see now I will get an error like this. There is already an object named student data in the database, because when you use this create view and student data, it check if the view already exists, and then you get an error message. So there's a different ways to do it. I can right click here, click delete in order to delete the old view, and now I can click here execute, and then now since there was no view, the view has created once more, and then I can click refresh here, and then you see, sorry, here, and then you see this view has been created once more. And now I can click and use this one, select all from student data, and then you see the student ID is also part of the view. So every time we want to update the view, we first need to delete the old view. So it's a bit cumbersome to do that manually every time we want to change the view. So basically you can also here on top enter a drop view and the name of the view, student data, like this. And then now automatically if there is a view, it will be deleted before it again creates the new once more. So as you might now don't want to have this student ID in the view anymore, then I just click execute, and then I first can use that one in order to delete it, and then I can click create view once more to do like this. I can also improve it even more to create or do this all automatically. So then I can take if, I can check if the view exists or not. So if exists, select name, from something called sys objects. So I guess you don't need to remember this code, you can just copy it from an existing example like this one, where name equals to student data and type equals to v for view, like this, and then it drops the old one. Then also go. Let's see now. So this part of the code, it first check if there exists a view called student data. If it exists, it drops the existing one before it recreates the view once more like this. So now let's see. Now I can also save this, so I have this for later. So it's saved on my hard drive here in this student data view.sql file. Now I can click execute, and then you see I can run it many times, because now it automatically checks if the view exists, and if it exists, it's deleted before it creates the view once more. So now I can easily change it here to student ID, execute, and this view will be updated automatically. And I change it back to student name, etc. Click execute, and then in that way we have a robust SQL script that is creating this student view. But before it creates it, it checks if it exists, and if it exists, it deletes it like this. That's how you create and use views in the SQL Server. And basically now we can use this view as an ordinary table. In this simplest form, select all from student data, but you can also create more advanced queries, just like you do for the tables, like this one. Select course name from student data, where student name equals to Elvis Presley or something. And then we get this information. So now we only get the course name, where the student name is Elvis Presley, like this. Or we can do like this. Select student name from student data, where course name equals to mathematics or something, like this. So you see, select all from student data. This is this one gives this result, and finally this one gives this result. So there are basically we can use this view as an ordinary table. We can also do like this. Select all from student data, where the grade is less than equal to 2 or something. Then you will get this information. So basically you can use this the view as an ordinary table, but the good thing about views, it contains information that are stored in different tables like this. In the next part of this tutorial, let's see how we can create and use stored procedures. So the problem is, in the previous part of this tutorial we was inserting some grade, and then we needed to use like this, insert into grade, and then we need to specify the course ID, the student ID, and finally the grade. But typically you don't remember the different course IDs and the student IDs, you remember the name of the course and the name of the student. But typically that information is stored in different tables, so then we need to split it up. First we need to find, based on the course name, we need to find the course ID in the course table, and then we need to find the student ID in the student table, etc. So typically a better way to inserting grades in the table is to create and use what we call a stored procedure. So basically a stored procedure is a very similar as a method or a function in C# or in Python or other programming languages. It's basically a piece of code with SQL commands that do specific tasks, and also you can reuse that stored procedures in many different queries or in different applications. And also a stored procedure can have input arguments and return values, just like a method or function in C# or Python. And it also adds a layer of security, because you can do a lot of harm by creating the wrong queries. You can delete the wrong data, you can insert data you don't want to insert, or you can update data in the wrong way, etc. And in that way you can create a set of stored procedures that is well implemented and tested properly, and the user that is going to insert data or delete data from the database should only be having access to these stored procedures, and in that way the data that you put in the database will be more secure. And also stored procedures can also prevent so-called SQL injection used by hackers, etc. And here you see an example of a stored procedure that are creating or inserting grades into this table or database that we have already created. So basically, as we did for views, we need to use this create, and instead of view we need to use create procedure and the name of the stored procedure like this. Then create procedure, create student grade in this case, and then we need to specify the input arguments. In this case we want to have the student name as an input argument, the course name, and finally the grade. And we also need to specify the data type. In this case the student name is a Warsaw 50, and the course name is Warsaw 50, and the grade is a floating number. And also note that this @ symbol is used in SQL Server to specify that this is a variable. So these are 3 different input variables, and then we need to specify this @ symbol in front of each variable name. Here later in the store procedure we can declare so-called internal variables. In this case at student ID, which is an integer, and at course ID, which is also an integer. So we use this declare command to notify that we are creating variables like this. And then, since we now want to insert grades in the grade table like this, insert into grade, student ID, course ID, and grade. But now the input to the store procedure is student name and course name. We first need to select the student ID from the database. So then select student ID equals to student ID from student where student name equals to at student name, like this. And the same for the course ID. Select at course ID equals to course ID from course where course name equals to at course name. Then the student ID for that specific student are put into the variable at student ID, and the course ID for that specific course name is put into the variable called at course ID. And then we use these variables here and we insert the grade. So then insert into grade, student ID, course ID, grade, values, and then at student ID, at course ID, and at grade, like this. Where at grade is an input argument, but the course ID and the student ID is internal variables that we select information from the database based on the student name and the course name, which is input arguments to the store procedure. So let's create this store procedure in the SQL Server Management Studio. And now we are back in the SQL Server Management Studio, and as you remember from creating views, we could right click here and create new view. We can do that the same for store procedures as well. So the store procedures are here under our grades database, under programmability, click on the plus sign, and then we have store procedures, and then we click plus here. There is no existing store procedure, so basically you can right click here and create a store procedure, and then we get this horrible template. There's no designer that we can use, but you can use this template as a starting point, but I don't think this template is so very good. But this one, create procedure, and the name of the store procedure is a good starting point, but all this template code is not so good, so I just delete it or just select new query, and then I create it from scratch. So then create procedure, and the name of the store procedure, which is in my case should be create student grade, like this. And then now we need to specify the inputs arguments, and then remember we need to use this at to indicate it's a variable inside SQL. So then student name, and the data type var *50 in this case, and then since there will be more arguments we need to have a comma here, and then I just copy it and change it to course name, which is also var *50, and here also comma, since we need a third argument for the grade, which is a floating number like this. So now, since there will be no more than these three arguments, we don't want to have a comma here, so only comma when there will be more variables. And then we use this as, and now as we need after the as we need to specify the code that is part of the store procedure. So then remember we have this insert into grade, and we have the student ID, course ID, and the grade, and then we need to specify the values here. But no, we don't know the student ID and the course ID, so we need to specify that one by creating an internal variable. Then we use the declare command, and then we need to have an internal variable for the student ID, which is an integer, and for the course ID as well, which is also an integer. So here we need to have a comma, since we have another variable but here we shouldn't have any comma because this is the last variable. And then you can specify, select, you can start by specifying select student ID from the student table where student name equals to the input name we have here, namely at student name, like this. And now we also need to put that student ID into a variable, so then we just use that one, equal, like this. Now we put the student name that we retrieved from the database into the at student ID variable, like this. And then we just do the same for the course. So I just copy the code. So then instead of student ID, I use course ID, like this. Instead of student, we use course table, and then course name, like this. And remember where you have here, so here we need to have an at, because this is a variable which retrieves the values from the database, and also here we need to use at, since this is a variable. And the same here, this is at course name, and then at course ID here. And now we can insert into grade with the student ID, course ID, and the grade. So then we just use student ID here, comma, course ID, and finally the grade, which we have here as an input argument, like this. And then finally we can also have a go, like this. So now, before we put it into the database, by clicking execute, we can also save this to a SQL file. So we save it together with, here we have a SQL script for the tables, and here we have the view file, and then we can do the same for the store procedure. So then create student. Of course you can call the file whatever you like, but typically we use the same name for the file and for the store procedure, and then you can just type in addition stored procedure, so we know that this is a stored procedure. But the name of the file here can be anything. But typically a good name, create student grade, which is name of the store procedure, and then just specify this is a store procedure, like this, and click save. And now if you go to the file explorer, we have this file here. So now we have an SQL script for the tables, a SQL script for our view, and an SQL script for our store procedure, like this. So the next step now is just to click execute. Some error in our code here. Of course it's not value, but values, like this. So now we can just click execute, and commands completed successfully. This means it should work as expected. So now we can go here, programmability, store procedure, right click, refresh, and then you see our create student grade store procedure has been created. So now assume we want to update the store procedure. We have find some error in code, etc., and we want to update it. Then assume we have made the updates, and now we want to recreate this store procedure. Then we click execute. But you see now, as we did for the view, this is already an object name called create student grade in the database. So it can do the same here. We can right click on the existing store procedure, click delete, like this, and now we can click execute here in order to recreate the stored procedure into the database. But even better, we can put some code here on top of the script to make sure that it checks if this stored procedure exists, and if it exists, it deletes it before it recreates the new updated stored procedure, like this. And here on type we set P for procedure, like this. Now if I now click execute here, now I can click it many times, and it automatically check if there exists already, and if it exists, it deletes the stored procedure before it recreates the updated version of the store procedure, like this. So now we have created the store procedure in the database. Let's see how we can use it. So we have the existing data in the database. If we run these queries, in the course we have these different courses, and we have these 3 students, and then we have started to enter some grades for student number 1, which is Elvis Presley. And then, as you remember, we created an insert statement like this: insert into grade, course ID, student ID, grade. But typically, as mentioned, we wanted to create a store procedure because we don't remember the course ID or student ID. So now assume we want to create also some grades for this student called John Wayne. It has a student ID number 2, but now we only need to remember the name. Then we can use this this stored procedure instead. So then we just use this command, execute name of the store procedure. So create student grade like this. Just delete this one. So now we have execute create student grade, which is the name of the store procedure. And then, as remember, if you open this store procedure, we have here on my hard drive create student grade store procedure. It has 3 input arguments: student name, course name, and grade. So then we want to create grades for John Wayne. Then for the student name, we specify John Wayne, and we want to specify a grade for this mathematics course, like this. And then finally the grade itself. Assume he gets 1-0 in the mathematics course, like this. So then basically now we can just execute this query by clicking execute here. And now 1 row affected. So if you go now back to our view, select all from student data, you see we also created a grade for John Wayne in the mathematics course. So also assume we want to create a grade in the other course, in the science course. Then you can just execute create student grade, and the name John Wayne in science course, and then here you get 2.0 or something like this. Click execute, go back to our view, and now John Wayne has got the grade 1 in mathematics and grade 2 in science, and finally in programming also. So now change to programming like this, and here gets 3.0. Click execute, and now yeah, I spelled I used the Norwegian name here, not programming but programmering. Now it should work like this. So now we have student Elvis Presley got grades in mathematics, science, and programming, and same for John Wayne, got grades in mathematics, science, and programming like this. But we now was entering these grades using this store procedure called create student grade, and then we just need to specify the name of the student, the name of the course, and the grade itself like this. And as you see, of course, this store procedure create student grade can be improved, because now if you, as you saw when I was typing a name of a course that doesn't exist, assume we have a course called, we think we have a course called IoT, but that doesn't exist in the database. As you see here, we have only these 3 courses in the database: mathematics, programming, and science. And now if I want to enter a grade for John Wayne exists in the database but not IoT, and then enter a grade 3.5 or something, then I will get an error because IoT course doesn't exist in the database. So typically we can improve the store procedure, and we can check if actually the student exists or the grade already exists in the database. And basically we can use an if sentence for that. So if exists, then you can type here, select all from student. I'll just copy this one. Basically, now we check if the student exists in the database. So if exists, select, this means if exists, then you can retrieve the student ID from the database, like this. You can do the same for this course. So then if exists, like this, and then select all, just copy this code. Now it checks if the select check if there exists this course name exists. If it exists, he can find the course ID from the database, like this. So now when I will run this one, you can click execute. Yeah, so I still get an error, so I also need to have a check here for the insert into grade. So I just copy this code. So if exists, so if well, if, let me see, how should I do this? If this student ID is not null and the course ID is not null, the meaning if either the student ID or the course ID doesn't exist. So if student ID is not null and course ID is not null, then you should insert the grade like this. So now let's just update the store procedure by clicking execute. And now let's see if we get an error when running this one. So you see, now you doesn't get any error, but it's still, since this IoT course doesn't exist, he doesn't create any new grade in the database like this. And then to make sure that the user understands that, you can also put an else here, else, and then use the print command. Like this, so then print, you can type here student or course do not exist or something. In that way, the user understands that he needs to use a course on a student that exists in the database. So if I run this now, it says here student or course do not exist. So then we need to change either that one or that one. So both the student and the course exist in the database. Also, if we want to, we can also update the store procedure even more. So if this either the student name doesn't exist in the database or the course name doesn't exist in the database, we can, as part of the store procedure, also create the student name and the course name. So here you see an updated version of the store procedure. So here we check if not exist, select all from student where student name. So if the student doesn't exist in the database, which is an input argument, we just insert into student. So then basically if the student doesn't exist, we create or insert the student. And then we can select the student ID from the database. which we are using in the insert into grade. And then we do the same for the course. If the course doesn't exist, we insert the course here inside of the store procedure, and then we select the course ID from the database, and then finally we can use this insert into grade like this. So now basically this should work because it checks if the IoT IoT course exists. If not, he creates it, and the same with the student. So now we can create a new name, Tom Hansen, that's the name of the student, and the course IoT. So now either the student Tom Hansen exists or the course name IoT doesn't exist, but it will be created as part of the store procedure. So now we can click execute, and then you see, of course, I didn't upgrade. So this is the upgraded store procedure. I have to click execute in order to insert the store procedure itself into the database. And now we can run this one. And you can see it has been created inside the database. So now go back to this one, or select all from student data, click execute, and you see Tom Hansen has now been created. And the course IoT has been created with the grade 3.5. And if you see here, select all from course, and the IoT course exists there as a course ID number 4, and select all from student. Tom Hansen exists in the student table with student ID number 4, and then we have the grades. This is the grade for this new course, the IoT course, and the student ID 4 is Tom Hansen. Now we have so far created a view which is handy to use when you want to get information like this, basically information that are stored in different tables. And then we have created and used a store procedure to also insert data that is typically stored in multiple tables like this. So now Tom Hansen was created in the student table, the IoT course was created in a course table, and the grade was created in the grade table like this. So far in this tutorial we have been creating a database view and a database stored procedure. Finally we want to create a trigger. So here is the problem description. We know was using this store procedure, create student grade, in order to create a grade for a specific student in a specific course like this. So execute create student grade, the name of the student and the name of the course and the grade itself. But also, as you remember from our database structure, in the student table we have a column called average grade, and so far we haven't focused on that one, but so far it's empty. It has no data, but typically we want to, every time we insert a grade for the different students, we want to update and calculate the average grade for each student. So in this case, if Elvis Presley, the student, has a grade in the mathematics course and a grade in the programming course and a grade in the science course, we want to find all these grades and put the average grade in this average grade column in the student course, in the student table. And typically one good way to do that is to create something called a trigger. So basically what is a trigger? So basically a trigger is executed when you insert, update or delete data in a table specified in the trigger. A trigger is similar to a store procedure in a database that but the code automatically invokes or executed when a special event in the database occurs, like inserting, update or delete data. And a trigger is also attached to a specific table. So typically when you insert, update or delete data in a specific table, that trigger will be executed. And typically you can use a trigger to change data in the same table or in one or more other tables. Like in this case, when we insert a grade in the grade table, we want to update this average grade column in the student table. So let's see how we can create a trigger for that. So here you see a trigger example. So then as for views and store procedure, you need to use this create and trigger, and the name of the trigger, in this case, calc average grade. And then here you need to specify which table it should be attached to. In this case, it should be attached to the grade table. So when you insert data in the grade table, this trigger should be executed. And here you specify if it should only work for insert statements, update statement, or delete statement, or for 2 or 3 of those. So then you just specify or list. If you want to make sure that the trigger works for insert, you then only specify insert. If you want it also to be working for update, then you need to specify update, and the same for delete. And then here you can specify internal variables like for store procedures, etc. And then you can specify one or more select, insert, update statements, etc. And then basically here is the trigger that we are going to create. So then first we need to find the student ID that for that specific grade that is inserted into the database, and that we can use a temporary table called inserted, which is part of the SQL Server. And then in order to find the student ID that is entered when we enter a grade for that specific student, we just use select at student ID equals to student ID from inserted, like this. When we have the student ID, we can find the average grade by using the built-in function called AVG, which is part of SQL Server, from grade where student ID equals to this at student. And then we can update this average grade column in the student table like this. Update student set average grade equals to this calculated average grade, where student ID equals to at student ID like this. So let's go to to SQL Server Management Studio to create this trigger. And as mentioned, a trigger is attached to a specific table. In this case, we should attach a trigger to the grade table. So then you can basically click here on the plus sign, and then you see how we have triggers here, but so far there are no triggers attached to this table. So basically we can right click, create new trigger. But for store procedures, this template that is generated is basically not so good. So typically it's better to just start from scratch by selecting new query and then start creating the trigger itself. So create trigger, and the name of the trigger, in my case, calc average grade, and then on. And here I need to specify which table this trigger should be attached to. In our case, the grade table like this. And then we need to specify for, should it be for insert, update, and delete, and then you can specify everything. Insert, update, and delete like this. And then we just use this as command. And now we are ready to start creating some internal variables. So then we need to specify this student ID, which is an integer, and you can also create an internal variable for this average grade. So like this is a data type float, and of course this is int like this. And here we need to have a comma since we have a separate local variable here. Now we can start by finding the student ID. So then you just use this at student ID equals to student ID from, and here we use this one inserted, which is this temporary table inserted like this. And now we can calculate the average grade. So then we just use select and use this built-in function average grade from the grade column from grade, where student ID equals to this internal variable like this. And the student ID is retrieved from this specific table called inserted, which is a temporary table that contains the last inserted record into the database. And then we can put the value that is calculated here into this at average grade variable like this. And now we are ready to update this average grade column in the student table. So student set average grade equals to this variable here, where student ID equals to this variable here. So basically that's it. So typically you can also put a go at the end here. And now, as for the views and for store procedure, we can just save it and put it together with the table script, the view script we have created, and the store procedure. And then we can just name the file calc average grade, and this is a trigger like this, and save it. And then you see it will be stored here together with the other files on the hard drive. And now it's only exists here in this script, it doesn't exist in the database. So basically we need to click execute here, and now we can right click on trigger, click refresh, and then you see this calc average grade has been inserted into database, and it is attached to the grade table like this. And now assume we want to update this trigger, assume we have found some error or something and we have updated the code, and we want to reinsert the trigger into the database. Then we click execute. Then as remember, we get this error because this calc average grade object or trigger is already existing into the database. So then we typically need to first delete it before we can insert this again. So then if I delete it, right click, click delete, and now it's gone. Now I can click here execute in order to run it once more. But even better, to have this code here in the beginning, we will check if the trigger exists. If it exists, it deletes it before it recreates the trigger like this. So now I can click, sorry, yeah, so just a spelling mistake here. So this is the name of the trigger. It has to be the same name here and the same name here. So now I can click execute here many times. And now it first check if it exists. If it exists, it drops it and then recreate the trigger like this. So now I can run it many times. And then I have done the necessary changes. I can save it. So all the files are stored on the hard drive in a specified location like this. And now let's see if this trigger actually works. So now we have the following data in our tables. We have the course, the student, and the grade tables. We have different courses, different students, and then you see this average grade is set to null, but now we want to update it based on the grades that we see here. So I can start by just delete all data from the grade table to make it simpler to understand. So delete from grade. This. Now we see what kind of data we have in the database. We have different courses and we have different students, but there are no grades. So now let's assume we want to insert some grade on this Elvis Presley, and we have this course called mathematics, like this, and he gets 3.5 in this course. So let's execute, and now you see he in the grade table got the grade 3.5, but also the average grade is set here in the student table. So Elvis Presley got also 3.5 in average grade because there are only one grade. But now let's also put in a grade in the science table like this, and here it got 2.5. Let's execute it and go back to the queries, and now you see in the grade table Elvis Presley got 3.5 in the mathematics course and 2.5 in the science course. But as you see here, the average grade will be 3. So then 3.5 plus 2.5, if you sum those and divide by 2, you will get the average grade 3 like this. Let's also put some grade in the IoT course. Then instead of science, we type IoT. Here he gets 1.5. Click execute, go back to the queries, and then you see Elvis Presley got these 3 grades, and then the average grade is also calculated like this. So this is how we create and use triggers in SQL Server. So I guess that's all. So now you know how to create views, store procedures and triggers, and how to use them in the SQL Server database. Thank you and goodbye.